This is the story.
All about how our lives got flipped turned upside down. I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there. We'll tell you how we came the parents of Josiah, Delaware.
I met my wife when I was 11 years old. I was enamored right from the start. She was lovely, kind, intelligent, beautiful, and knew how to make me laugh. I hoped that she would someday be my wife, as I didn't want to live my life without her. We got married relatively young, and a little over 3.5 years, we had our first daughter, followed by our second daughter 2 years later. While we were truly content and definitely living the dream, we kept having this nagging feeling that our family just wasn't quite complete. We would continue to ask God if we were supposed to try for another biological child or even possibly adopt. We prayed for 7 years, and then one night it happened. We weren't actively pursuing adoption, but God had a plan, and we met the boy who would become our son.
2 years ago, we met our son at a Christmas party.
It was the Christmas party for the company I worked for, and we were also going to see a friend there that we knew since middle school. He was there with his family, which included 3 biological children, but they also had with them 3 children that they had been fostering. 2 girls that were close to the ages of our girls, as well as a little baby boy.
So we met the girls first, and I just remember that the youngest one was off and kind of joyfully giggling, and then the older one just had this look of just radiant joy on her face and this beautiful smile. That was kind of my first memory of them. And he told us, our friend said, hey, his wife was somewhere else and just around the corner, and he said she's with the baby, but I'll have her come visit with you to talk to you about foster care and what's been going on with us. And so she came over. The first thing I thought was, oh my goodness, that's the cutest little round face I've ever seen. And so when he first saw me, he just reached his little arms out for me. And so I went ahead and took him and held him. And then we ended up talking to her for quite a while about some things that have been going on with him. And then he ended up holding him as well.
And so then he reached up his arms for me, and so I held him, and the foster mom was just amazed because he hardly ever went to strangers and he never went to men. But he was just as content as could be.
Went back and forth between the two of us for at least 20 minutes.
Right. So then she took the time to tell us about foster care and just how important that was, and really that she thought we would be a great couple to do fostering and to serve in that way. And I think at the time we maybe thought about it a little bit, but kind of got back to the car and discussed a little bit, and it wasn't really something we were interested in at the time.
So we were, the next day, we were going on vacation. So something that's kind of miraculous is that we were even at this party because we had discussed not going to the party because we were still packing and we were going to need to get up at like 3:34 in the morning or something to catch our flight. And so, one of our daughters had dance that night, and so we were like, oh, we're going to have to try to get her there and do all that. And so we almost didn't go, but our youngest daughter of the 2 really wanted to go because she always thinks it's a really fun party. So we decided to go ahead and go. So that was one thing. And then another thing is the year before, the facility where he had worked for, he'd worked for the same company for I guess at that time 11 years. But and so he had been in the position he was in for about 6 years or 7 years or something like that, and they closed the facility and they only kept on a handful of employees out of 200 something. And so I think there were like 5 or 6 of you or something that got to keep a job. And so they gave us the option of moving or of staying and him moving to downtown to take a job there. And so had we not been at that Christmas party, we would have never met our son. So it's just, when we look at all of it, him not taking the job, but deciding to stay and is what kept us there and helped us meet him, and us deciding to go to the party. And so that's a really neat thing too. When we met him, so the place where we met him has like a trampoline park and all the things for the Christmas party, and the girls had, and you can like win things, and so the girls won a stuffed animal, and I was holding him, or Jerry, one of us was holding him. They were like, oh, like, would he want this? We won this. And it seems like they were asking the other foster mom, could he maybe want this? And so it's kind of sweet because they gave a gift the first night they met their brother. We went on our trip and that was wonderful, and we all had a great time, and then we came back and had Christmas, and then we got a phone call one day. Well, actually that morning I woke up early that morning, and I was thinking of them, the family, the foster family, and so the previous foster family. So I was praying for them and thinking of them, and I was like, goodness, I wonder how everything's going. And then around 9 o'clock that morning, I looked down and my phone was ringing, and I picked it up, and it was her. She was calling me to ask us if we would just help out just for one night, if we could watch the baby so that they could take their biological children to a movie, and so and spend some time together. So I was like, oh, I think that should be fine, but I wanted to talk to him first to make sure. And once he agreed to it, then they brought him, and he, from the moment he came into our home, was like a perfect piece, which just kind of was really beautiful and interesting, because I had told my girls, I was like, he might come, and since he doesn't really know us, he might cry all weekend. But she said the reason why she called us is that seemed like there was some kind of connection there, and he felt really comfortable with us, and so she thought maybe that would work, maybe they wouldn't mind having him. And so that was really why she asked us. And that night the girls had a friend over, and so they were kind of hanging out and doing their thing, and then I had made a soup that had like chicken and celery and onion and some other things in it, and he I didn't know that he previously hadn't really eaten anything savory. He only liked sweet things, and so he sat down and he ate a whole lot. She said, I don't know what you do, but I love you for it, because now he'll eat things. And so that was really sweet. But that next morning she called me pretty early and was like, oh, I'll come get him before you go to church, because it was a Sunday morning. And we were like, oh, it's fine, we'll just take him with us, no big deal. And so we took him, and our youngest daughter had always wanted a younger sibling, and so she was in church, and I'll never forget, she was holding him and she was singing, and she just had tears streaming down her face as she was holding him. And so that was really precious. The first night that he was with us, he had never crawled before, and like within the 24 or 23 hours that he was with us the first day, he started crawling, and so it was really sweet and neat.
Puppy. 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 That's right. Hi. Well, this is the first time I've seen him crawl.
And so that afternoon, she called and said, previous foster mom called and said, do you want me to come get him now? And I was like, well, he's doing great. If you wanted to take a nap here, then that's fine. You could come get him later. And she was like, actually, my dad's on hospice and I could go help out my mom. And so we were like, sure, do that. And so she came back several hours later, and she said that on the way there, she and her son were discussing, I bet they're so done. I bet he's so done. I bet they're just like ready for us to come. And it was the opposite. She opened the doors to our home, and she was like, I was just flooded with peace, and was like, wait a second, what's going on here? And she said, and then I saw him with you, and I was like, oh, I think that's his mom. And so I guess I had kind of like, didn't really want to give him back. But that night before, I was holding him, we're in the kitchen right now, but I was holding him, standing in the kitchen holding him, and I looked down at him, and I was like, oh, he looked up at me, and I'd never had this experience before where I was holding, a baby, and that wasn't one that I birthed, and he looked up at me, and it was like, if his eyes could talk, it was like, hi, you're my mom. And it sounded so bizarre, and I'm like, how can I even tell anyone that? They're gonna just think, I don't know what they'll think, but I was nervous to say it to anybody. And so I didn't actually even say anything to him about that. We didn't know his backstory or anything. And so that next day after she took him, it was funny because she left and she was like, she called her husband and was like, I think we've been raising this baby, like our friend's baby, like this is going to be their baby. And, which was pretty amazing. And so she was like trying to figure out, she was like, I didn't know how to tell you, like, I think you're his mom. And I was going, I don't know how to tell her that I think I'm his mom. Because I didn't even know anything really about him much. And so that night she was like, we need to talk. And so she called me later that night, and she kind of started to tell me what she thought. And so it was kind of like we danced around it, and we finally both came to the same conclusion, like, oh, like we're thinking the same thing, we're feeling the same thing. She was like, okay, so nothing short of like 1,000 miracles would have to happen. Or she actually talked to her brother about it, and that's what he said, because he had had a similar experience where he just knew his son was his son whenever he, the first time he met him, actually, he knew. I'd explained to my daughters that we have no idea what might happen here, that we may give our hearts to this child, and that we may have to kiss his sweet little round cheek someday and say goodbye. And would their hearts be prepared for that? Would they be able to do that? I wanted to be thoughtful of how they maybe would feel. Our oldest daughter said, you know what, Mom, I just feel like Peter stepping out onto the water and just trusting Jesus and just waiting to see, what happens. And so I'm fine with this. It's okay. And so like my heart will be okay. And then with my younger one, she was like, oh, she was so excited and so cute. Oh, I read Matthew 7:7, and it's about seeking and asking and knocking, and so maybe we just need to seek, and we just need to ask, and we just need to knock, and then we'll figure out what's supposed to happen. So her heart was fine with it too. And so then I went to talk to him to see kind of what he thought about it.
And so she came to me and said, I believe that God has told me that this is our son. And I was a little taken back, and knowing that she was very thoughtful in all of her decision making, knew that this wasn't just a rash decision. And so I told her I am completely committed to walking through every open door. And as we went through the journey, it just seemed like every door that we came up against, God would open it up, and we just continued down the path. And Matthew 7:7 continued to show up throughout our lives. We shared it as a family each night, and kind of got excited about what God was doing.
I think one time I went to get a book off the shelf, and a book fell into my hand, and it was like, this happened twice. Like one time it said something about, this whole thing was about like adopt the child or something. It was kind of like, oh, okay. And then there was another one that was out about our adoption in Christ. And so that was, we were kind of like, oh, like this is really, felt like it was just right there before us, that we were supposed to really pay attention.
So then we began to provide respite care for the foster family, sometimes hours or days, and then got approval for weeks, just to help them to recharge.
And the way, like with respite, that just is what that is you're helping a foster family, but you're not actually officially a foster family yourself. And so we did that, and just about a month really into us taking care of him. It was Valentine's Day, and he was home, and I was home with him, and he saw a picture of him, and he goes, "Dada?" And we were kind of like, did I just hear what I thought that I heard? Because I wasn't really sure. Then he walks in the door after work, and he goes, "Dada!" And I was thinking, oh no, I don't know what to do with it. I don't know if this is okay. I don't know. And so that night, it was Valentine's Day, and we have a niece whose birthday's on Valentine's Day. So we went to have dinner with that side of the family, and then I was taking our oldest daughter to the ballet, and so I took her on a date to the ballet. But on the way there, I dropped him off to be with the previous foster family. And in the middle of the ballet, she texts and she's like, has he been calling your husband Dada? And I was like, I kind of think maybe he has been. And she said, because I thought that's what I heard. And she was like, and then so he, but he was crawling around the house in pursuit of Dada, trying to find him. And so then her husband came in, and she's like, nope, pursuit's still on, like he's not Dada. He kind of acknowledged him and then kept going. And so she was like, clearly he's not the one. So I had to say, I think that's what's going on. So it was kind of funny. Well, then so he called him Dada, and then shortly thereafter I was also Dada. So he called us both Dada for quite a while, or several months. I guess it was just a few months, but that was kind of funny because we're like, me Dada or that Dada, but really cute. That year, 2019 going into 2020, I was kind of praying before the year started, and kind of like, okay, God, what do you have in store? Like my husband always prays, help us to love people well. And so that's always something that we're pursuing as a family, is loving people well. And so I thought, I was praying about what do you have in store for me this year? How can I love people well? What can I do? And it was funny because I felt like I was saying that it's going to be a big year. And so I was kind of interpreted that completely wrong, because I was like, oh, it's going to be a big year. Like, maybe he's going to get promoted, or maybe something is going to happen like at work. Totally the world, as everyone knows. I mean, it was a big year for everyone worldwide, for humanity, because 2020, the pandemic comes. So that was another thing. Court stuff got really backed up because of the pandemic. And then also, he had been working for the same company at that point for 12 years. And a large portion of his department got laid off because the industry in which he was in did not do well with the pandemic. And so that happened. So it was like the opposite of what I thought might happen. It was kind of comical. I'm sure God was like, yeah, you're thinking pretty small here, when you're thinking that that's what the big thing is going to be. It just was interesting because it was a big year in with that, and with the job loss and pursuing a new job, and with falling in love with this child and not knowing what was going to happen. So it was a very big year. It was around when he kind of lost his job. My sister and I were talking, and she started asking questions about the girl, and so about Josiah's biological sisters. And at that point I had gotten to know them and just loved them, and I was able to kind of tell her about their personalities and how great they are and wonderful and how we love them. And so my sister, never having met the girls, just said, well, we'd love to foster them, and then if they need to be adopted, then we will do that too. And I said, well, do you need to talk to your husband about it? And she said, no, he'll be fine with it, because we've already talked about adopting older children before, and so he'll be completely on board. So that was kind of beautiful. There were no strings attached. They just were like, we can't wait to meet them, and hope that that we get to go ahead and foster them. And so that was really pretty incredible that worked out to where the children could be in the same family unit, because they could come and stay with us and get to visit with him. And naturally we're going to be together because it's my sister and her family. One thing I will say that we did not account for in this is we accounted for the fact that our hearts might get broken. We did not account for the fact that this boy might fall madly in love with us too, and that his heart could be that it could be really traumatic and difficult for him, because he loved us so much and felt our love so much. The previous foster family was wonderful, but our son had bonded to us so much that it became increasingly difficult for him to be away from us. He would get in the car with her, and he would just cry and cry. And one day he was supposed to be with them for 3 nights, and ended up just going for 1 night, because that whole day that he was there was inconsolable and just kind of a puddle on the ground and crying. And we could recognize it now as he was grieving. He wouldn't eat, kind of thrashed through a bath, and then ended up going to bed. So that next morning, the foster mom, we weren't okay with him not being okay, and neither was she. So we arranged to be able to pick him up, and so we were going to kind of meet halfway and go to get him. And the foster mom put him in the car and said, "You're going to go." And at that point, he had already started calling me Mama. "You're going to go see Mama." And so he was going, "Mama, Mama," and then he knew that he was going to get to go home to our house. And the other foster family had prayerfully decided that it would be best for them to go ahead, since they knew that they weren't going to be a permanent placement for the children, that they would go ahead and have them possibly be fostered by other families. And so we ended up going ahead and fostering him. As time went on, there's a therapist that was so precious, and she does like all the court documents and things, and she was writing court documents, and then I would read them, and one of them was like, it would be, and she told me this in person as well, lifelong detrimental at this point for him to be removed from your home. And it just hit my heart so hard, because I was like, oh my goodness, like he needs us. Like I don't know I don't know how any other way to put it except that his heart was so entwined with ours that for him to not get to continue to be with us would have been heartbreaking for him, as well as us. But that I just didn't know that hadn't thought about that, I guess, whenever we began the journey, that this could be really hard for him too.
Are you climbing? Oops, sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm going.
You pretty much made it. Wow, you did it. Yay! Are you ready to slide down?
It took quite a while until all of that, everything was finalized, but we did get to adopt him. And on the very same day, my sister and her husband adopted the girls. And so it was really so special that they get to be family still. And so that's kind of our journey. And we learned so much throughout the entire experience. I think so many people through the pandemic learned that we don't have as much control in life as we really think that we do. And that's the case with fostering. You don't have really any control, hardly at all. And so you just kind of relinquish it and let go and trust and believe that God loves these children more than you do. And you love them so much that when you think about it, you're like, wow, he does have a plan. And so trust. And then I think there's so many times in our lives that we really try to insulate ourselves from pain or discomfort in any area. And this was something where we knew we were putting our hearts and ourselves out there to possibly experience that. And so I think it was good. I think it was a good thing. I had a friend ask me one time, so we had not adopted him yet, and she said, so if things don't go the way that you think that they will go, would it still be worth it? If you have to say goodbye, would you do it all over again? And I was like, yeah, in a heartbeat, I would do it all over again, because he's worth it. He needed someone to love him. He was behind in his development, physically, socially, cognitively, and now, in a very short time, he's really smart, and he turned it. It's amazing what God's love can do, what our love for other people can do, because he just is now ahead on everything. And so it's just a blessing and just a testament of love and what love can do. As we started reflecting on the things that have happened over the last several years, I had remembered some things, and I had seen some things that I had journaled about. And one of the things was that my mom was adopted from Japan when she was 3 years old. And her mom, who adopted her, she was in her 90s, and we were having Christmas at my mom's house, and then my sister and I were going to take her home. On our way to her house, my younger sister was driving the car, and she turned to her and she said something about my husband and I. Aren't they wonderful parents? Shouldn't they have more children? And my grandmother at the time had not been able to speak well. She'd always been really witty and really fun, but she was having a hard time even just saying one word at a time. And so it's really special, this story, to me, because it's the last time I actually heard her speak in a full sentence. And then she ended up passing away just a few months later. So the thing that she said is, she said, yes, wonderful. Yes, one more. Yes, one more. You need one more. And so it's just kind of neat, because she had 2 biological children, and then she adopted my mom. And so we had 2 biological children, and then we have adopted our son. So that's just a sweet memory to me. And then another thing that happened is that I had a dream one time, and there were, in my dream, 3 of my friends were there, and they were all pregnant. 2 of them were standing kind of closer together, and the other one was off. And none of these 3 friends actually know each other. But whenever I saw them, they were all pregnant. And 2 of them, I think thought they were done having kids. And I think that most people would have thought that. So it was kind of like, oh, well, that was interesting that they were pregnant in my dream. And then the other friend didn't have any children yet. And so I was like, oh, that's so neat. Well, then in the dream, I realized I felt like I was pregnant too in the dream. I ended up seeing one of them like that week, I think, and I said, oh my goodness, you were just in my dream and you were pregnant. And she was like, her eyes got really wide and she was like, I haven't told anyone, but I'm pregnant. And so that was really neat. And then I found out shortly thereafter that the other one that was standing close to her also was pregnant, and that was a big surprise for them and as well. And then the other friend, I found out probably about a month later that she was pregnant too. The two friends that were standing near each other ended up having children the month before our son was born. And then the other one, just within like a couple of weeks, a couple of weeks before our son was born is when that one was born. So really they're all really close together. So it was just kind of interesting, like the feeling that I felt like I was supposed to be pregnant. It was like that would have been when he would have been in the womb. And so that was just kind of an interesting thing for us to look back on and say, wow, that was just really a neat thing. So that kind of leads me into my daughter, and I'm gonna have her come and tell this part of the story with me. This girl would pray like really long prayers, sometimes 10 to 15 minutes. I'd hear her praying in her room, and something that she consistently always prayed was,
so I wanted a younger sibling ever since I was like 3, and so I pray to God for him to keep any future siblings safe and healthy.
So when we looked back on it, we were like, oh my goodness, God answers prayers in such profound and mysterious ways, because he kept a child in another woman's womb safe and healthy. And I won't go into all of that, but our son could very, very, very easily not even be here for a multitude of reasons. And so it is incredible that we feel like her prayers protected her brother and kept him safe. And so that's something that's really special. And looking back on the preparation for all that God was doing for Josiah to come and be in our family.